Let's take a look at Canto 26. We're in the realm of the fraudulent counselors, the deceivers, the people who lie, the people who pretend, the people who con people. And we get a really significant start off to this with just the first few lines. Always look how something begins. The first few lines. Be joyful, Florence, since you are so great that your outstretched wings beat over land and sea, and your name is spread throughout the realm. I was ashamed to find among the thieves 5 of your most eminent citizens, a fact which does you very little honor. Now, this is coming right after the previous canto where he's meeting thieves from Florence. And so he comes right out, be joyful, Florence, since you are so great. And that I think we can all read as sarcasm. And that's significant because, yeah, sarcasm. We're all familiar with it. Oh, yeah, Florence, could you be any worse? Sarcasm is deception. You are saying something on the surface and meaning the exact opposite. So, right at the beginning of this, which is about deception, about words having false meanings, he is starting off with sarcasm, and he's significantly part of it himself. This is Dante the poet writing this. This isn't speech within the of characters within the poem. This is Dante himself engaging in this. So you can see already he's admitting, and maybe he means for us to see it. Maybe it's just coming out of him because he is kind of sarcastic and nasty from time to time. But I would say it is very deliberate that he is including this in his beginning to signal that this is about the deception of words, the deception of language, the deceptions of meaning. Be joyful, Florence, since you are so great. It is satire, but it is a lie. It is deception. And that scorn also comes out because you can see, of course, he is no fan of his fellow citizens of Florence. Remember, so much of this poem is built on his resentment of being exiled, of his resentment of all the people who kicked him out and stripped him of everything that he has or really values in his life, of the people who forced him into a state of exile. And so he's always going to take a shot at them. He did it in that last canto, and he can't resist doing it a little bit more here. It's like, I'm not done talking. Why is this in this canto and not the previous one? He's not done talking about his fellow Florentines. He just can't let it go. And there you can see also a bit of a progression. He is being the character, the voice of Dante, the poet, is becoming slowly more coarse, becoming slowly more corrupted as it gets down deeper into hell. Sarcasm is very foreign to the early Conti. Think of Francesca. He was so moved and so sincere and so pitiful of her. He was so merciful towards her. There was no sarcasm in the way he spoke about her. But here, that he's been going through so much more ugliness of humanity. He's been investing so much more, and it is rubbing off on him. Like when you hang out with nasty people, you start to become a little nasty. And you can see that also just beneath the surface, that slow progression, that slow development of the character of Dante the poet as he gets down deeper into hell. Dante the poet and also Dante the character, I would argue. But he turns around and turns it and recognizes and calls it out, and also calls himself out. I was ashamed to find among the thieves 5 of your most eminent citizens, a fact that does you very little honor. So there he is admitting that, I got a little sarcastic. Now let me just say what I mean. So he's still trying to regulate there. I think he's still struggling with himself as to whether or not to give himself over to that kind of resentment, that kind of bitterness, which again is something that as an exile he is struggling with. That day-to-day reality that people took everything I care about from me, and how do I deal with that? The circle of hell that he sees is of the deceivers, and he engages with flames. He sees these souls burning in flame, and think about what heat can mean in terms of passion, in terms of a self-consuming passion. A fire consumes itself slowly. It burns out. And in that way, I think we can all understand, anybody who's ever, thrown a tantrum can all understand how that is similar. When you are really angry, when you are enraged, it slowly consumes itself. When you are really passionate, it slowly consumes itself. And just bear that in mind as you go through the actual words on the page and it starts to come out. Dante himself has a very self-reflective moment here as a poet. I know that I grieve then and now again. I grieve when I remembered what I saw, and more than ever I restrain my talent, lest it run the course that virtue has not set. That sense of restraint is significant. He needs to reel himself in. Perhaps he too is getting emotional about this. Perhaps he too feels a little bit of flame burning to get expressed. But restraint is a key element of all classical epic literature, I would argue, where the ability to keep your head about you and not give yourself over to emotionalism and not give yourself over to a kind of rage. That is all over the Iliad and the Odyssey, particularly I would say the Odyssey. But in this you can also see our old friend Dante the egoist. I must restrain not just my emotions but my talent. I need to just not go off on soaring flights of rhetoric. I need to just, okay, I'm just gonna, I gotta tone it down. I don't want to get too carried away with myself. I can do that and it would be fabulous, but I really need to just keep straight and narrow, just the facts, ma'am, here. I could do all that because I'm great, I'm Dante, but I'm gonna just keep it buttoned up for now. Dante always struggling with his creative hubris, let's say. He's always bubbling with this poetic genius that he knows he has and so few other people can recognize. Or at least he thinks not enough people. But that struggle also for dominion over them, for dominance over them, it is another indication of Dante the poet struggling with a kind of viciousness, with a kind of ugliness. I could just, overwhelm you with my words, but I'm not. I'm going to pull it in. I'm going to reel it in, keep it in check, and let's just go about this as best we can. And the figures that he sees, I think, are significant. He sees two Greek figures that we come to know are Ulysses, which is the Roman character, the Roman name for Odysseus, the Greek hero, and also Diomedes. And they are big heroes of the of the Iliad, of the Trojan War. And of course, Odysseus goes on to be the main character in the Odyssey. But the fact that they're Greek is significant, because Dante never learned to read Greek. Dante, remember his encounter with Homer in Limbo? Homer was silent to Dante because Dante could not read him. Virgil, his guide, can. And perhaps Dante feels a little rivalrous of that, a little envious of that skill. Greek is a very hard language to learn. So Dante never picked it up, but he knows that Virgil was fluent and read all of Homer in great depth of understanding, and is perhaps a little envious of that, a more hostility burdening him with that in that relationship. That rivalry keeps bubbling up. And my guide, who saw me so absorbed, explained, "There are souls concealed within these moving fires, each one swathed in his burning punishment." "Oh, master," I replied, "from what you say, I know now I was right. I had guessed already it might be so, and I was about to ask you." And I love that, because Dante is not sure what to make of these flames, and Virgil jumps in and says, "Well, let me explain this, because you don't know Greek, you don't know these figures as intimately as I do, so, I will tell you all." Little one-upsmanship there, but then Dante, not willing to be put in second chair like that, comes back and says, "Oh, yes, I know. I was about to say that. I was about to say, hey, you can do this for me." And he's trying to wrest control back from Virgil. They're always struggling with this, and this very polite relationship that they have on the surface, this very polite diplomacy that they have between them on the surface, is actually kind of jostling one-upsmanship underneath, which is a sign of deception. Neither one of them are being particularly honest with the other by saying, "I'm better than you are." They both feel that way, theoretically, but they're not saying it. They are deceiving one another with their words. And then Virgil has, however, the ace in the hole of knowing Greek. So you can see Dante having to cede that to him. I don't understand what is going on here. I don't know these figures as well as you do. I cannot speak to. Speaking is such a key thing here. Verbs, or verbal ability, words, so important to understanding what's going on in this canto. Dante is silenced. Dante is mute. And that is a challenge for him. And so Virgil has to explain for him. He said, "Within, Ulysses and Diomed are suffering in anger with each other." Anger is fury, anger is rage, anger is self-consuming. "Just vengeance makes them march together now, and they lament inside one flame. The ambush of the horse, Trojan horse, become the gateway that allowed the Romans' noble seed to issue forth." The Trojans went on to found Rome. "Therein they mourn the trick that caused the grief of Diadamia, who still weeps for Achilles, and there they pay for the Palladium. If it is possible for them to speak from within those flames, I said, Master, I pray and re-pray you, let my prayer be like 1,000, that you do not forbid me to remain until the two-horned flames comes close to us. You see how I bend toward it with desire. He's trying to express himself without words. I bend toward it. But he has to express all of this through Virgil. Your prayer is indeed worthy of highest praise, he said to me, again trying to grant something to Dante. The power to grant is like another kind of one-upmanship. He said to me, and therefore I shall grant it, but see to it your tongue refrains from speaking. Silence yourself. Shut up. Let me do the talking. Control! Leave it to me to speak, for I know well what you would ask. Perhaps since they were Greeks, they might not pay attention to your words. Dante would just be speaking gibberish to a Greek. So when the flame has reached us and my guide decides that the time and place were right, he addressed them and I listening to him speaking. Look at all those times that he's referencing his master, Virgil, speaking. This is getting at him. This is gnawing at him. This is more negative feelings underneath that he's trying to smile his way through. O you who are two souls within one fire, if I have deserved from you when I was living, if I have deserved from you much praise or little, when in the world I wrote my lofty verses, the Aeneid, which is a sequel of sorts to the Greek epics, do not move on. Let one of you tell where he lost himself through his own fault and died. There you can see Virgil sort of calling on his own greatness, his own legitimacy, his own street cred in the epic world to call on these two figures to come and speak to them, always interposing himself between these great heroes of the Greek the Greek epics and Dante. Virgil's making it all about me. It is me calling on you to speak to my poor little friend who doesn't understand a word of what you're saying. The greater of the ancient flames' two horns began to sway and quiver, murmuring just like a flame that strains against the wind. Then, while its tip was moving back and forth, as if it were the tongue itself that spoke. The tongue is speech. Tongue is not an accidental image there. Tongue is speech. As if it were the tongue itself that spoke, the flame took on a voice and said, when I set sail from Circe. And here he retells his adventures on his homecoming, which is the retelling essentially of his adventures in the Odyssey. Earlier, significantly, Virgil touches on the founding of the founding of Rome. The Trojans escaped from from Troy after it's burned and founds Rome, which is the retelling of the Aeneid. So here Virgil is flaunting all of this epic significance, all of this greatness of the epic tradition in front of Dante, and Dante's just sitting there like saying, well, I wrote a few short poems and a couple of books that I didn't finish, and well, now I'm writing this other long poem, and maybe I'll finish that one. It's a little rivalrous. Virgil's being, I gotta say, a little bit of a dick here. But it is also calling in more sense of the words, the language of the Aeneid, the language of the Odyssey and the Iliad. All of this sense of language, of poetry, of writing significantly, and speech. that is open to and demanding of interpretation. We're supposed to be looking between the lines. And he tells the story of how, and this is not in the Aeneid, or this is not in the Odyssey, he tells the story of how he returned to his home of Ithaca at the end of the Odyssey, and then he gets a little bored and he wants to go on another adventure. Odysseus is the great wanderer of the Greek tradition, and so he wants to take up another ship and go explore unknown worlds. And so he gathers together a group of sailors, a group of followers who he hopes to recruit. And this is significant. Brothers, I said, who through 100,000 perils have made your way to reach the west, during this so brief vigil of our senses that is still reserved to us, do not deny yourself experience of what there is beyond, behind the sun, in the world they call unpeopled. Consider what you came from. You are Greeks. You were not born to live like mindless brutes, but to follow paths of excellence and knowledge. With this brief exhortation, I made my crew so anxious for the way that lay ahead that then I hardly could have held them back. And with our stern toward the morning light, we made our oars our wings for that mad flight, gaining distance, always sailing to the left. The night already had surveyed the stars the other pole contains. It saw ours so low it did not show above the ocean floor. 5 times we saw the splendor of the moon grow full and 5 times wane away again, since we had entered through the narrow pass, when there appeared a mountain shape, darkened by distance, that arose to endless heights. I had never seen another mountain like it. Our celebrations soon turned to grief. From the new land there arose a whirling wind that beat against the forepart of the ship and whirled us round 3 times in churning waters. The 4th blast raised the stern up high and sent the bow down deep, as pleased another's will. And then the sea was closed again above us. So Odysseus, out of his own boredom, went and gathered up this crew, seduced them into another adventure through this speech, this very stirring speech appealing to their sense of adventure. You were not born to live like mindless brutes, but to follow paths of excellence and knowledge. To be all you can be as human beings, you need to come with me on this adventure so that we can be supermen of sorts. Knowledge, kind of like the knowledge of good and evil. Knowledge is always that lure for humanity, always that seduction into, destruction. That lust for knowledge, to know, to go beyond where no man has gone before, to seek out the unknown, the undiscovered country. He stirs them up so that they have to go along with him. And then he leads them on this grand voyage to the other side of the world, to the vast unknown, and to their doom. He uses his speech, his words, to seduce them that this is some grand adventure, that we are going to go out and learn so much. But they just all die. Maybe, you can read this as maybe, they got to the other side of the world, which was unheard of in the year 1300. You don't know what is on the other side of the world. Australia did not exist for an Italian of the year 1300. But maybe that's just the tease for the reader. What is on the other side of the world? What is out there beyond the horizon? We are kindled. And yes, this is not telling us. This is more iceberg under the surface. Are we being seduced too? He's turning it around on us now too. Because, yeah, that image of discovery is attractive. That image of adventure is seductive. And I want a piece of that too. But where does my culpability fall? Here I am painted as the reader as a kind of victim being swept along by Odysseus's, Ulysses' words. But of course, it ends on that speech. It ends on Odysseus telling this story. So it's not Odysseus's words so much as the lingering marionette strings of Dante's words, Dante's poem. Dante is layering this with so many different realms of complication. There is Dante the poet writing Dante the figure, who is speaking or getting the translation of the figure of Virgil, who is speaking to this figure of Odysseus, who is telling a story. And in Greek mythology, Odysseus is a known liar. So there's all of this interpretation going on. There's all of this complication, and we're supposed to wrestle with that. But at the heart of it, Dante is indicting himself. Because if words can lie, if words can inspire this kind of irrational pursuit, if words can do that, words are dangerous. It's not just these people, these fraudulent counselors who are deceiving, but the words themselves can be deceptive. And what is Dante's, what does Dante work with as an artist? Words. That redounds to his sense of guilt as well. Is Dante, as a poet, as a guy who makes his living effectively as a poet, and originally also, but previously also as a diplomat who is always speaking, he knows the power of words. He knows how he can incite people to do things with words, how he can rob them of their reason, how he can get them to do as he wants, as he is getting Virgil and an avatar of himself, and even the great heroes Diomedes and Ulysses, to do as he wants, like puppets on a string. He is very aware of this, and he is implicating himself, because words themselves seduce. Words themselves and the power of words, the power of language, of writing, of speech, of poetry, that power can be handled irresponsibly, can be used for evil. And he is dwelling on that, I think, very self-referentially.